Yeah, happy evening to folks from India, and a very happy morning and to folks from US and Canada, and a very happy afternoon to Rob joining from outside of Amsterdam. Pleased to welcome you all to this Spin Chennai's big video conference session with Rob on leveraging AI and ML in the DevSecOps Tool Chain, fueling a modern digital operating model. Before Rob gets to talk, I have the pleasant duty of doing three things: set the context for the session, introduce Rob, and also give a brief intro about Spin Chennai to Rob and to those who are new. So prior to 2020, digital transformation was indeed a force of its own. Possibly maybe less than 50% of the gross domestic product worldwide was digital. As businesses generated revenue from software applications and they used new technologies to build proprietary solutions. That was the situation prior to COVID. Then the world was hit with a global pandemic, and digital transformation itself was transformed, right? Businesses no longer view digital transformation as a source of innovation, as just a source of innovation. It has become a requirement for business continuity, enabling teams to work anywhere and organizations to rapidly adjust in the face of a crisis. Whereas they typically used to move forward cautiously with the digital transformation earlier, but today companies are relying on it for the stability and agility it offers in their operations, workforce, and customers. Modern technology solutions are all central to this development. The data, organizations are converting data into meaningful value, finding new ways to serve customers, and building solutions that are relevant for a rapidly changing socioeconomic environment. So they have started successfully reinventing for the digital economy. That is really the digital transformation that is happening today. There was a survey which came out with 83%, greater than 83%, believe they need to embrace the tech intensity to be successful in the future. Earlier, they never thought technology, they thought technology to be for the back office towards, automating manual processes, and that has been the focus. But today, they have understood the power of technology, and the tech intensity, the term, has become highly relevant. It refers to the applied use of a creative entrepreneurial mindset focused on inventing new digital capabilities to solve complex challenges for business and government in active and intentional combination with advanced digital technologies. So if you look at digital transformation, it has its effect on customer experiences. It has its effect on growth. It has its effect on, obviously, operational processes. And also the creation of new products and new services. So at Spin Chennai, we have recognized the need for organizations to embark on the path of digital transformation. Today, in the world, we don't have a step-by-step framework in order to go on the path of digital transformation. While there are a few models, but they are local, and they are local to particular organizations, and they have been prepared with a focus to make money. Whereas at Spin Chennai, we are a not-for-profit, and we believe in the larger good of the community. So we have started work on developing a India-centric digital transformation model, maturity model. Maybe it will take about, we have started on the journey. The think tank has been formed, and that is debating under the leadership of Dr. Ellen Rajaram, one of the core founding members of Spin Chennai, who is also on the call today. So he is leading this effort, and we have a think tank, working on this. So we have been having, almost fortnightly meetings on this. So we are hoping to, in a matter of 6 to 9 months, we are hoping to have a model which will be discussable, which will be wherein we can do a self-assessment. That is the kind of framework we are working towards. So, yeah, given that backdrop, today's session is again on that path. Take Rob, who is the co-chair of IT4IT at the Open Group, and is a senior DevOps architect at DXC Technologies US. His area of expertise includes DevOps, IT4IT, IT service management, ITIL framework, continuous integration, continuous delivery, enterprise architecture, TOGAF, scaled agile framework, SAFE, AI Ops, agile development, project portfolio management, PPM, lean portfolio management, LPM, service integration and management, CM, cloud management, risk and compliance management, IT financial management, value stream management. Very, very important themes, very, very central to the digital transformation. So helping IT organizations to design, build, and transform to a new IT and digital operating model, covering new ways of working, new processes, people, data, tools to automate, end-to-end IT value stream, transforming the IT organization to a lean, agile, and automated delivery organization. They're all both, both the tool set, on the tool set as well as mindset activation. Both are Rob's key value levers. He has been designing and implementing modern digital operating models, value streams and processes to various global clients. And he has been also contributing to leverage various practices and standards such as IT4IT, DevOps, ITIL, Scaled Agile, Scrum, TOGAF, COBIT, VerySM, SRE. I think one of the leading lights from Europe on this on these topics, very, very important topics. So today we are going to listen to him for the next 1 to 1.5 hours. I would encourage everyone to be more participative, more intensely listen to him and get your questions clarified. Please do post your questions in chat so that we are able to cover most of them. So about Spin Chennai, little short of 25 years old as a knowledge ecosystem. Spin Chennai is affiliated to Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute as well as the ISACA global body. Our vision is to build a world-class knowledge ecosystem, which is very compelling, highly relevant and value-adding to the people, distinctly futuristic, and passionately co-creative. We have today a 4,000 plus member knowledge ecosystem comprising of CXOs, senior leaders, SVPs, VPs, HR, marketing and sales professionals, quality and delivery professionals, domain experts around BFSI, telecom, automotive, manufacturing industry, senior consultants, mentors, academia, and various other institutions. So we have been bringing international gurus. We all know that Dr. Watts Humphrey was very passionately connected with Spin Chennai for more than 10 years till his untimely demise. So we have various other experts on, for example, Dr. Bill Curtis uh, from the CMMI Institute, who developed the CMMI model, people CMMI model. Louis Trigger from Israel, who is a specialist in area of constraints, TOC. Mark Johnson, who is a management thought leader from InnoSight. Dr. Jeff Sutherland, who is the co-founder of Scrum. Author of CXO Talk with more than 1,000 appearances. Barry Griggs, ex-Microsoft CTO for IT. Steve Beres, partner at Bain, focused around Agile. Manuel Arriaga of YouTube, SRE. Lakshmi Shankar of Twitter. David Duncan of InnoSight, and several other leading lights from India and the world were part of Spin Chennai over the last 1.5 to 2 years. So it is, we are all very, very keen to hear Rob speak to us today. And without spending any more time, I would like to invite Rob to share his thoughts around this very, very important topic. Hopefully, we will have more of Rob as we move forward with our digital transformation maturity model as well at a later point. And I encourage each and every one of you to unmute at this point and put your hands together to welcome Rob to address Spin Chennai community.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, good day. It's a great honor to present to this community. So what we're going to talk about today is this new digital operating model. Call it the DevOps model. How do we develop and innovate IT services from idea to production? So we're going to look at digital operating model, and there was already some things mentioned about DevOps, scaled agile framework, ITIL. How does it all blend together? But then we'll zoom into how do you leverage AI and machine learning in this new operating model. So what I'm going to do is basically focus on how do we generate value through IT, and how can you leverage AI in this digital delivery model itself. Now, probably many organizations like yourselves, it's more difficult to get the right people in your IT organization. There's more and more focus on automate IT management activities. It could be deployment, testing, monitoring, security operations, and we see more and more automation in our IT organization. So today we're going to look at what kind of automation do we have in IT function, but also how can we leverage then AI and machine learning. So let's have a look at the agenda for today. So first we're going to look at some high-level introduction. I'm going to the digital operating model. What do you need for capabilities to design, build, and test your digital services, IT services, bring them in production, support the customer. So we look at what kind of value streams do you need, what kind of capabilities do you need in the operating model. And then we're going to explore what kind of automation capabilities do you need, and what kind of AI and machine learning activities are part of that. And then we look at also the enabling, go through the different examples of, for example, AI in DevOps and AI in operations. So how do we see that today in the market? Now, AI and machine learning, let me briefly talk a few topics about this. So, because you could argue, what is AI and machine learning? Now, today I'm not going to go into all the depth of what AI is itself, because we're going to look at how is AI applied into IT management. But typically AI consists of basically using data in an intelligent way and create models. So AI is typically, in this example, how can you recognize, for example, the difference between a dog and a muffin? So we're going to look at that, how is that done? But typically how it's done in this example model is you train a model, and then you leverage the real data and try to decide, it could be algorithms that you use to decide whether is this now a dog or a muffin, for example. And that's training the systems to take decisions on real life data. But of course, there's more. It could be about collecting data and do predictions and take successful decisions. But in reality is AI is sometimes not that intelligent as we think about it. It's more about algorithms and models you design and build and apply to real life situations. And that's what we're going to look today. But if you take this simple example of how easy is it to differentiate a dog and a muffin and use algorithm for that. Now you can imagine initially this sounds very simple, but the reality is for a computer to decide whether something is actually a dog or a muffin is not that simple, as you can see in this picture. And that's the reality, right? Data and information is available, but it's not always easy for systems to use the data to take decisions because of the complexity. You see here a simple example that it's not that simple for computers to differentiate it, even for the human eye sometimes, right? But we're going to look at today, of course, different type of AI and machine learning opportunities. And I guess you already have this picture seen before, that we use AI as a concept that is much broader, that we leverage basically machines and algorithms to take decisions. It could be like Amazon using purchase predictions, planning, categorizing your incoming mail, things like that. And machine learning is basically a subset, again, from artificial intelligence, more to use more algorithms, more in-depth algorithms. And then deep learning is another alternative where you typically use neural networks with a larger volume of data to take decisions. So as you can see, AI and machine learning has a lot of link with data science methods, right? Data analytics, data mining, and big data. So it's really about data often. And we're going to today look at how this kind of technology is used in the IT organization itself. But before we do that, I would like to zoom into what do we need in a digital operating model, and what do I mean by that? Now, what we see is that the way we develop and manage IT services, or nowadays digital services, is changing, as you see in this picture. And maybe you've seen that before. I use it a lot, but we see the organizational model is changing. So we move from a hierarchical organization more to like autonomous teams, a team organized around a product. And they're starting to continuously develop this product. So they use DevOps practices. You design and build the product, so you also manage it in operations. We don't want to release only yearly or quarterly or monthly. We want to be able to continuously release new features or fix something quickly if something is broken. And in the past, we saw that we are very process driven. If you think about ITIL in the past, we had many different processes, instant problem change, and all those processes are now moved into, okay, let's call them practices, but now even more, we want to go through value streams. It's not about the individual process, but it's about an end-to-end value stream. So we organize around value streams as well. And at the same time, we see the architecture model is changing in IT. From a larger monolithic applications, we move into microservices, APIs, and platforms. The hosting model is changing, of course, to virtualized machines, cloud, containers. The way we source IT services is changing. We broker services. So large outsourcing deals we had in the past is changing. We move into brokering services with different vendors on more like flexible sourcing. And the traditional supporting models is changing into more self-service and self-help. So what you see is that the way we manage IT, the way we use practices is changing a lot. But the real challenge is that this is hybrid. Not everything is cloud native. Not everything is DevOps. Not everything is continuous delivery. So we have a hybrid model of traditional applications, new one, and that's the real challenge. And we're going to look at what do we need to set an organization to be able to cater for this. Now, but then the question is, why is AI the future of DevOps? And DevOps I use now in the context of the entire digital delivery model. So AI is basically the future of IT management. And we talk about this a lot, right? We have a smart car nowadays, a smart home with all the devices, they're connected together. We have smart factories. But if you think about IT, we have a similar challenge. The IT organization, if you could say a factory, you could argue, is it very smart? Do we have the insight? And as you could see here, for example, as in your home, you could have different devices connected together, and so that we can communicate to each other. Or end-to-end service processes needs to be aligned. In an IT organization, that's often not the case. We have many different isolated teams with different tools. End-to-end workflows are not always that optimized. So today we're going to look at how can we optimize this kind of flow of work through an IT organization, end-to-end integrations. Now, just to illustrate a bit before we zoom into AI, DevSecOps or IT delivery is pretty complex, right? And just to illustrate, what do you need to run a digital organization? You typically have your application portfolio, you got your portfolio backlog where you collect the epics, like the strategic projects and initiatives that you want to invest in. Then work moves into your product and team backlogs. Nowadays, we talk about sprints and features and stories. We have source code. We have our pipeline where we do the build, the releasement, the testing orchestration. We have building tools, artifact repositories where we store the builds. We have our code quality scans, test management. We deploy our services to production, and then we need to start monitoring. But we have different type of monitoring, like infrastructure monitoring, application performance monitoring. We have security monitoring. We have log analytics, event management, and of course, we have our traditional service management system where we manage incidents and changes. Not to forget the CMDB, because it's good to know how everything is connected from an application down to the infrastructure layer. We got self-service portals for self-help and collaboration tools like Slack and Teams to work together, and dashboards. Now, just to illustrate that, but it's not about individual practices anymore, individual tools or the data within these tools. It's about optimizing this end-to-end flow from idea to production, or there is a security issue identified. How can we fix that? Or an end user wants to have access to a business application. It's now really about end-to-end value streams and end-to-end flows. And as you could see here as an illustration, that's pretty complex. And then we're moving into the data. If you think about data, across all these data that I just showed, there's a lot of data in IT. We have our applications, the CMDB, we have our service catalog, we got our backlog tools, we got our contracts and licenses, we got security events, vulnerability. As you can see here, there's a lot of data in IT. And typically our challenge is that that data is scattered around in many different tools, many different departments. For example, enterprise architecture has their own architecture repository where they maintain the artifacts there. We have IT service management where they manage the CMDB, the incidents. We have our development teams that work maybe in Jira or Azure DevOps and have their data there. So it's spread around a lot of data. And typically what we lack is integration between all these different data sources to really leverage the data and take clever decisions, because that's a challenge. And the reality is that in most organizations, we have all this data because the things that I just showed you, every organization has, right? All these data sources, everybody has that. And the reality is that we only use 5% of that data to take decisions because the rest is just stored in monitoring tools, logs, and we don't really leverage that data. Now imagine we're going to use AI and machine learning to leverage 100% of the data we have in IT to take quicker decisions, understand the value, understanding the risk, deliver better software. And now that's what we're going to explore today. Imagine we can use 100% of all our data in IT and we can now take better decisions because there's too much data in IT. We cannot analyze that, but with data analytics, with machine learning and AI, we will be able to leverage the data and take better decisions. And also, why is that so important? Because, and I'm going to show you that the volume of data in any IT organization is growing. First of all, of course, we see it in a trend that was also mentioned in the introduction. We are more dependent on IT just to operating our business, to innovate, but also improve our collaboration with customers and vendors. It's part of our business. Now, at the same time, we see we have more services to manage. So the volume of IT services only go up. Even if we rationalize our application portfolio, the number of components in IT is escalating. We got more cloud services. Think about Internet of Things, microservices, containers, more and more services we need to manage. And will be dozens or 10 times, 100 times more services than we have today. Imagine we have to manage that. We got more vendors in our ecosystem. The number of vendors we work with, think about cloud vendors, specialized vendors, is only increasing. At the same time, we need to manage more changes in our ecosystem. Continuous delivery, every week or month release new changes, daily fixes. So we got more changes to manage across this landscape. We also have an increasing security and event and threats opposed to any organization. So it's security events, threats, vulnerabilities, which is be a bigger and bigger challenge for many organizations. So that only goes up as well. We got more regulatory requirements we need to adhere to. We need to be compliant, like data privacy, operational controls and policies. It will only go up. So we got more controls. At the same time, we got more management data, like we have our test logs, our build logs, our monitoring data. Because we have more components and more changes, we also have more monitoring data, which we somehow need to take decisions upon. And also what is often forgotten, we do a lot of standard requests in IT. Somebody is joining our organization and needs access to a business application. So it's a lot of service requests, and the number of service requests will increase significantly. And it could be access requests, could be a request to deliver a new server, add capacity, remove capacity, scaling. The volume is increasing. And at the same time, we got more APIs and dependencies between applications. So increasing complexity. And at the same time, we need to be better, safer, faster, cheaper, and at all the same time. So basically, these trends force us to rethink how we are developing, testing, and deploying and managing services. And we need to become a data-driven organization in IT, not just for the business, but also IT needs to be a data-driven organization. And we need to create a new management capability to manage this complexity in IT. And that's what we're going to talk about now. What do we need, and how does AI and machine learning fits into that? Now, I want to start introducing to you a operating model. And I'll start small, but it's more like giving you a bigger picture of what do you need to run your IT organization, and then starting to explore what are the capabilities part of that. And it's a high level model, but it is basically everything you already do today, right? Everything I'm going to show you, you are doing today with various tools, various practices, but it's good to have a reference model in place so that you can start working on improving areas that are interested to improve. Now, this value chain is derived from the open group IT4IT reference architecture, but it's more like your bigger picture that we can start working on, and then we can plot how different developments in the market and AI plots to this model. Now, let's start with the model high level so that I can zoom in later and explain to you where do I see automation and AI playing a key role. But the key element is here defining everything you need to run a digital organization. Now, the first thing we need to think about is what are the key workflows in IT? So what does make IT work? And typically that's what you see here. There are 4 key value streams that basically drive what we do in IT. One is more the strategic side. On the left side is the strategy to portfolio. It's basically capturing new ideas and demands. Maybe it's rationalization opportunities, but it's the bigger ideas. And we need to translate that ideas and strategy into execution. Like, what am I going to invest in? What taking decisions? So that's one area. It's more like the strategic epics and initiatives. And of course, for every product and service we have our product backlog. Nowadays, we talk about a product backlog or a service backlog, but here we have the team managing all the products. And if you have 100 products in your IT organization, you have 100 product backlogs. And there you manage your enhancements, your new features, your stories, you do design and build and test and make that product available. Of course, once something is running in production, we do support them with standard requests. It's basically the request to fulfill. Somebody wants to have access to my application, want to order something. So, and that's where we have the request to fulfill activities. And this should be as much as being like an Amazon.com or have a portal where you order your services and it's automatically fulfilled. And of course, we still in operations, we need to monitor our services and we need to, maybe somebody needs help or we have an issue. Now, this is a starting point because there's much more, but you can imagine there are different kinds of workflows in IT we need to optimize. Now, let's have a look at what are the key capabilities, part of these workflows. Now, let's start with strategy to portfolio. The strategy to portfolio is really about managing our product portfolio. In ITIL, we always call that the service portfolio or our application portfolio, but it's really our product portfolio, service portfolio, where everything we deliver to our business is maintained there. And it could be applications, could be technology or infrastructure product. Together with architecture, we look at what is the portfolio, how well is it performing, where do I need to invest in, and creating roadmaps and so on. And that drives continuous improvement. So basically, we always start with our current portfolio, with the architecture, assess it, and we come with new ideas and demands, and we align that with our strategy and we build a portfolio backlog. So basically, these are the key capabilities you need in your organization, and you have them, right? Maybe maybe a lot of organizations don't call that a portfolio backlog. Sometimes they call it a project portfolio management, PPM, but it's basically managing all the epics initiatives where to invest in, but also align the investment, and that's the biggest challenge, with your strategy and with the ideas, and align it with your architectural roadmaps, because it doesn't make sense to have a backlog with a lot of epics features if you don't know where to go to. So you need a high level vision, where we need to go to, where we need to invest in, and then make it actionable. Then the next is, what capabilities then do I need to actually start building my services? So we basically talk about, again, going to the different teams, have a product backlog. So we have an integration from epics, that new ideas, they move into different product backlogs. And here we typically call that a story or a feature. We typically start with a feature, breaking it down into stories. And that the teams can then starting to design, develop, do the code quality. They starting to have typically, hopefully have a sort of release and deployment workflow where they can starting to build the software, then deploy it to test, starting to test, deploy it to acceptance, and deploy it to production. And this kind of end-to-end workflows is basically continuous integration and continuous delivery. And once something is deployed, typically, if you want to go to production, you might have a change that is still registered so that we can inform our customers, this is what we're going to deploy. And we have a change impact assessment and change approvals. And here you see a lot of discussion nowadays that the DevOps community and the ITIL community say, do I still need to change because I already tested it? So that's a kind of discussion you get as well. You're starting to deploy and configure your services. Once you deploy something, hopefully you can automatically update the CMDB. Tell everyone what is running where and how is the world connected from a business process down to the infrastructure layer. And hopefully we can also start monitoring our services once something is deployed. And of course, when something is operational, as I mentioned, you need to have a good service catalog so that people can consume the service, maybe through self-help or self-service. They request access, it's provisioned. So it links to identity and access management. I want to order a new server, a new laptop. I want to order capacity, all those things, all these automated workflows. And then we move into monitoring. So once something is provisioned, we start to monitor our services. Hopefully we can automatically detect issues, hopefully proactively detect issues. And we have some automated remediation. It could be performance issues and we add some additional capacity, or we find an issue and we can automatically remediate that. Think about runbook automation. But to do that, we also need configuration management to tell us how is everything connected so we can do the root cause analysis, for example. And then, of course, if you cannot fix it automatically, we raise an incident, we assign it to the right team, we monitor our service levels, we do security operations. As you can imagine, monitoring and event management, we also do that from a security perspective, monitor the compliance, monitor vulnerabilities, security events, and so on. And of course, we get questions from end user we need to fix. And hopefully, when we have identified recurring incidents, we create a problem that we say we need to fix this, and to really fix something, we need to send it back to our development teams. They fix it and deploy this again. And then we also monitor usage and capacity, just adding it here, like we want to understand our resource usage, cost efficiency. And then we have a feedback loop from to strategy to portfolio again, and evaluate how well our portfolio is doing. So with this picture, it basically shows you the key capabilities, what you need to run a digital organization. And it's a bit simplified, right? But and everything on the picture you have in your IT organization. And none of the organizations can live without this. And it can be good or bad or partially automated. And of course, we have some supporting capabilities as well, like manage your finance on IT, HR, security, vendor and contract management, and some data analytics and reporting. But it's really important to start with the bigger picture. So what I want to do now is look at all these areas and later on plot AI and machine learning capabilities to this. But it's good for your own organization also build this kind of integrated picture. And just to show you what kind of practices do we have today in the market enabling these kind of capabilities. So ITIL is typically sitting on the right side, right? But to be honest, ITIL covers almost everything, but typically ITIL is used today for the operational process like instant problem change, request management, and it's limited to that. On the development side, we also have kind of overall framework, like a skilled agile framework that more looks from the development perspective. Some people would say safe or skilled agile is a DevOps framework. No, it's not. It's more like a development framework. It doesn't include operations. It doesn't tell me, do I need request management, how to manage incidents, how even to do monitoring? No, it doesn't cover that. It only covers release something in production and monitor maybe a bit, but that's it. Now, of course, DevOps is bigger. It covers the development on ops side, as you can see here as a practice. We have agile practice like Scrum sitting in a subset of that to do the, like say, the backlog management and the sprint. We have CI/CD practices nowadays with continuous delivery. And a new practice you see also now in the market is site reliability engineering, SRE. And that's a practice that typically is also across dev and operations to automate a lot of those operational tasks, whether it's monitoring, automated scaling your infrastructure, creating better observability, but all those and reliability of the infrastructure and the application design. So it's a new perspective, but it's not. It was already part of our delivery model. Security, of course, typically has its own practices, like NIST as an example. And yeah, you have security and so on with ISO, for example. And typically what organizations do, as is shown in this picture, have different practices blended together to build this integrated model. Now, this was just an introduction, but it's very important to understand how does all this link together, because eventually it's not about individual machine learning or automation capabilities, it's about how everything should be connected together. Yeah. There's a question. Oh, there's somebody not on mute, I guess. And so let me zoom into the. I think there's somebody not on mute.
Yes,
so we need
sorry
to check.
about that, Rob.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So what is really about is looking at this whole continuous flow of work. So we have continuous planning, continuous delivery, continuous operations, and it is really about creating the end-to-end traceability, making IT flow, streamline and automate your activities, and have continuous feedback loops and a faster feedback loops to learn and improve. So basically continuous improvement capabilities. Now, if you look at the tooling market, because we talk about IT automation here and machine learning, and the IT management tool market is pretty complex. And this is just an illustration of what kind of vendors play in this market to help us automate, digitize, and support our end-to-end workflows. And you can see vendors more on the strategy to portfolio, development, testing, monitoring, security, financial management, IT, license management, and so on. So it's a complex landscape. And the key message is that, you know, this is not, you have this all today as well, maybe not all these vendors, but a lot. And it's really about how do I integrate the different components together to realize these end-to-end value streams. And now so now I want to go into how do I enable then and support these automation with AI and machine learning. And AI and machine learning is relatively new in the IT management space, but we're going to explore what is currently available in the market and where do you see the market going to. But there are basically three areas where machine learning can be leveraged in this digital model that I just showed you. And those main categories are related to data. So we see a lot of use cases in IT to look at using large volume of data to take better decisions, like typically the monitoring and security space is using those kind of capabilities. So that's one. Yeah, we look at areas where there's a lot of data in IT and then leverage data analytics and machine learning and AI in here. We also see AI typically at the level where we communicate and collaborate with different stakeholders, like the end users, like a chatbot or virtual assistants, sentiment analysis, so that we understand how satisfied is the end user with the service based on his feedback, comments, and so on. And of course, we use AI on the last point is we're starting to automate more and more IT activities. And we do that today, like a CI/CD pipeline, our deployment tools and monitoring. And more we see that AI is becoming part of those automation workflows. And I'm going to zoom into that in more detail. So what I'm going to do now is plot the different AI capabilities that are currently in the market or are currently being developed. I'm plotting it to this overall digital operating model. So let's start with one area of AI and machine learning is really at the engagement layer. So we see in IT, we engage with the business and customers, and there's a lot of interaction. And to improve the customer journeys, improve the interaction with our users, we typically see more and more the use of virtual assistants and chatbots. So it starts typically, and it started with the service desk. And most organizations started with using virtual assistants for the end user, the customer on the business side, basically, really like CRM kind of. But now we also see that in the IT organization, which is very common nowadays, that most organizations have a virtual assistant capability to interact with end users, whether they have just a question or an issue, and they try to talk to a bot and they get an answer through a knowledge base. Maybe it's just a password reset they need to do, or they have a question how to do some work. And it's basically about optimizing the user experience and saving the service desk from doing value-added activities by using bots. And it could be used as well for onboarding, offboarding new employees. There is like a sort of workflow that the virtual assistant would go through. So a new employee onboarded based on question and answers. We know, okay, he needs a laptop or she has a mobile phone access from a buildings, maybe access to these business applications. It's basically a whole automated end-to-end workflow to support the end user through, and maybe there's still some approvals needed. And in some cases, we also make sure that the approvals can be done by bots. Or if there is really an issue that we need to raise, the bot will raise the issue and then automatically categorize an incident based on the information the end user has done, or with questions and answers, or based on the text. We categorize the incident automatically, route it to the right team. And route it to the right team is based on learning from the past, because maybe we have 100 assignment groups. How do we know which incident should be routed to which person that is now available, but also have the skills, or which team? And that's basically where they look at historic data to know, okay, this type of incident should be picked up by this kind of team. It's relatively simple to start with this kind of technology. So we talk about this chatbot or virtual assistant. It could be like an example here that you threw a chatbot to say, I cannot log into my CRM portal when I have an issue. And then you can ask, do I have the credentials? What is happening? And then the bot will check out some data and he says, oh, your role has changed, so you don't have access anymore. Or somebody wants, or in this case, the bot will automatically contact you and say, hey, your laptop needs to be refreshed, so you need to you get a new order, and you're starting to engage with that. So it doesn't have to be end user initiated. It could be automatically initiated. For example, if I try to log into an application a few times and I don't succeed, then in principle, the virtual assistant could pick this up and say, hey, what's going on from an end user experience? So where you see that AI is typically starting to use now is at that level I just explained to you, service desk level, incident management. You see that a lot of vendors in this market are starting to leverage this and buy basically technologies to integrate with the service management tooling. For example, ServiceNow is an example. So this is basically the trend that AI in IT management is not a standalone product. It's just something that becomes part of the product. So if you have ServiceNow, for example, for service management, you now get AI capabilities which will be embedded in your flows. It could be like a self-service portal, incident management for automated routing, language processing. So somebody types a text and we automatically start to understand the text and the meaning and find knowledge records, or create automatically knowledge and resolution records. As you can see, all vendors are now buying specialized AI companies, and ServiceNow in this example bought all different type of AI companies, and that's what you see a lot. Atlassian and all the big players in IT management are buying AI companies to build and integrate that technology into their products. Now, another example of what's happening is in this area is, for example, change management. We see that if you can imagine changes are registered in your service management systems, and we have hundreds of changes that are registered. How do we enable the change impact assessment? How do we potentially assess the impact of this change, potential downtime, who needs to approve? Can we also do change failure prediction? Can we analyze this change and say, oh, this will not be a successful deployment? And to do that analysis, we need to analyze the change itself, like what is changed, maybe the builds and the test results. We need to understand which do we have downtime or not, and all those kind of things. And here you see that organizations starting to apply AI, or basically our tool vendors starting to use AI as an add-on to change management. And here's an example of that. It's, for example, a solution that basically helps them to register a change and assist the CAP, the Change Advisory Board, by collecting the right data, assessing it, and doing sort of initial risk assessment. So the persons that need to approve a change are assisted. And over time, you will probably see that in a DevOps mode, I don't want a manual CAP approval anymore. I want to automate all approvals. I just want a bot to verify my changes and say, yeah, this team has been very successful in deploying changes. It's a trustful team. I assess review the test results, and they can send, and the change management basically bot says, yeah, it's okay, green, and you can deploy based on all the different controls that are defined in the organization. The next point I want to go to for AI is in the operational space, because that's probably the most invested area nowadays, next to the chatbots, is AI ops. So using AI in monitoring space. So what are we talking about here? So basically, we have many different monitoring tools normally, like we monitor the infrastructure layer, the application layer, everything connected together. And that's where all the events come in a sort of central place, an event management system. And nowadays we call that an AI ops platform. So because we use that data to predict potential issues, automatically remediate issues, do service failure prediction based on data we find in logs, for example. We can say, oh, if this is happening now, probably in an hour time, something will fail. And we can do root cause analysis there. We can find automated remediation through runbooks or more flexible scripts, or chat ops, where we can support our operational activities through bots as well. Now, I'm not sure in the past if you know that, but monitoring event management has not been that mature in the past. And leveraging AI is not new in this area, but it's never has been that successful. And the reason for that is most cases, events come in from a monitoring tool and they say, this is happening. And what's happening on an event by event basis, we're starting to automate. If this, then that, right? That's the kind of logic. If this happens, then do this. These are very static rules. They're not maintainable, because you need to correlate data and take decisions, and you don't want static rules to say, if this is happening, then I need to do this. That is fine for very simplistic complexity, but if you have a more complex environment, that's not feasible anymore. And that's where we are running into today, that our IT environment is pretty complex, with containers, interfaces, APIs, components on-premise, components in the cloud, with all these changes with APIs. And today we typically lack the observability of how everything is connected. Now, I can assure you that an AI ops platform with just data can also not help you much. So what you need is an AI ops platform with the understanding of how the context of my landscape. So this is where AI ops and your CMDB comes together. How is my landscape enabling my business? And then I can plot my monitoring data to this. I'm looking at the time, I'm going to skip a few slides here. So really talk about a kind of AIOps platform that collects monitoring data, observability data, do the analysis of that data, detect issues and events, hopefully proactively detect issues, leveraging different algorithms like anonymity detection, or just do it for the forecasting, if this is now happening with my performance, and all this type of data correlation. And nowadays, there are many different AI algorithms, just like algorithms that look at the data and try to predict based on learnings that, oh, this could be an issue, or it's different than we've seen in the past. And typically it requires a lot of data analytics. And as I mentioned, it requires a good connectivity of your landscape, like a CMDB. And I'm not saying every data should be in the CMDB, but you should have a service topology picture of how the world is connected together. Because how do you else know that if there's a failure on this component, impacts component there, and correlate data? Now, and that's what you see today as well, that most AIOps platforms or monitoring tools, they started to build this kind of topologies, which is very complex. So here we talk about creating complex topologies, combining that with monitoring data and take clever decisions. Now, here, this picture shows you a kind of how does that AIOps platform fits into my overall landscape. AIOps is probably the most used AI component in IT, but it's sitting on the right here. So it's basically that system that collects all the data from your monitoring tools, whether it's an application performance data, infrastructure data. And as I mentioned, the data comes together here, but it uses the topology from the SIEM to B to understand the service model, the superb service topology, and then automatically create an incident, or hopefully you can automatically remediate issues through automation before the customer is impacted. And what you see as well is that you cannot have a good AIOps if you don't integrate with the pipeline. So development needs to instrument during the application development the way to create observability and logging and things like that. And that's we're going to zoom into later as well. So AIOps is a key example of AI today in our operations organization. Another area where we see AI a lot is in the security space, of course, and which makes sense, which is basically the third area of major investment in AI, in IT, is security, because security is probably the fastest growing market for management tooling and processes, like your SIEM, your security incident event management. So doing the log analytics and analyze your data, do threat intelligence, identify exceptions, who is not, somebody logs into a system which is not authorized to do so. We see things happening that we don't expect or didn't expect. We see maybe also vulnerabilities. We scan environments and we see, or we collect known vulnerabilities in the market. And we get a feed externally, say these are potentially vulnerabilities, and we check in our own environment. And so these are monitoring tools that require a lot of data processing where we use AIOps as well. So basically the SIEMs nowadays, they embed more and more AIOps into their system. And you see that with Splunk and Microsoft in their AI platforms, event management platforms. And there again, we have different algorithms that are used to collect the data, detect exceptions, identify anomalies, do clustering the data, do root cause analysis, but also support people in investigation. So it's maybe AI assisted investigation, getting the data collected in one place, and then be able to recommend recommendations to resolve issues, like or it's a recommendation that an operator needs to accept, or it's even automatically providing recommendations because we don't want to wait a few hours if there's really something happening where we need to act upon. Now, the next thing I would like to go through is how we leverage AI in the DevOps community. So more on the development and going to the deployment. In the development side of DevOps, we see more and more, and that's relatively new, leverage AI there. And on the right side, that's currently more used more often now. But what is new is that whole DevOps model where, and it starts with the code management and code optimization, so in threat modeling. So what we do is again, there's a lot of data in the source code repositories, in the build artifacts, and that AI is scanning the code, trying to analyze the code and recommend improvement. So this is about learn best practices in coding, do code optimization. And this is typically, of course, where it's not that very complex because you could define practices there. But the idea is, of course, to also learn, so that the system learns that, say, if you code it like this and it's operations, it gives issues, or we have in the past seen failures with that. So it also tries to learn from based on test results, what is good and what's not good. So it's integrated with test management. And more we see AI appearing in my test management systems. The most easy one is to generate test data so that you use bots to create relevant test data cases based on the functional specification and your code and the actual data in production, trying to anonymize the data. AI-driven testing so that we identify what needs to be tested. So it tries to analyze the changes in the code. It tries to look at the original test cases and see where there are gaps in test cases, rerun test cases based on doing the analysis, what has changed, do risk-based assessment, regression testing, things like that. And of course, software component analysis is a part of that. That's not new. It's just part of, we scan every software component, see if there's potential issues with vulnerabilities, with license problems, or open source software components that we should not use. And basically the AI part of that is that it tries to analyze the data, take decisions, and learn from that more and more. So it's starting to start small in this AI space as well. And then we see more and more AI used to look at backlog prioritization. So how do we prioritize all the work that comes through IT? Can we score based on value, risk, impact? And you see that more and more AI is used to do automatic categorization of demands. In the backlog, for example, typically backlogs have a lot of stories in there, and most of that story data is text, because you have a feature or a story, there's a title, and the rest is just a blob of data. And the idea is that the data is analyzed in text to see what is this story really about, and then collect that and compare that with other stories. So, and that's basically natural language processing here. And that's where, because there's a lot of text stored in design documents and in your functional specifications, that can be analyzed and verified. So that's an area in AI Ops. Let me skip this slide for a moment. So as I mentioned, summarizing AI in continuous delivery has a lot to do with code quality, software analysis, linked to test management, but also security testing, of course, is a key area. We have static and dynamic security testing cases where we try to analyze a system in production, or in this case in a test environment, to see if there's potential issues for, and try to do all type of automation to verify, okay, this is a safe environment. And you see that, for example, this is an example from AWS where the application is called Code Guru. Basically, what you see now is that Microsoft and Amazon are basically adding AI in their code management repositories. For example, code review. Code review in the past has been typically a peer review by other people, other developers. But now we say, no, we create automated code review. Somebody commits their code, it is reviewed, but we also give advice of how to improve your code, resolve vulnerabilities, and have this continuous feedback loop, basically, of a reviewer, profiler, and improving code. And that's just the small cases where you see that AI and automation is used in this kind of traditional software development, because the software development methods itself have not changed significantly with the coding, the building, and testing. But now we leverage automation and AI in that space. Now, and then I complete the picture here in more detail. What you see here now is basically the complete picture. And let me highlight some more areas, but this diagram shows you where we see AI in the IT management space. Now, maybe I should add here as an example, the purple ones is really about the risk and compliance. That's also a big area. Many organizations are struggling to do compliance management, getting the data and understand the state of compliance, whether it's just about configuration compliance or compliance against controls, data policies, access rights, and that compliance reporting is pretty complex. And the reason is that we need to collect a lot of data. And the idea is that nowadays you see that more and more that, for example, in the case of configuration compliance, that we use AI and analytics to understand the compliance of our infrastructure. Identity and access management is a key one. People that left the organization, we need to revoke their access rights, or if they change a role. Now, this is, and the split between when AI starts and whether it's just normal automation is not always easy to do, right? But in normal automation, it's typically rule-based. So somebody left the organization, so then I can revoke his or her access right, which is really a simple logic. But it's more complicated when people are not logging into the system anymore. And then an AI can say, oh, based on the learning of this person in this community, that or he or she doesn't need this access right anymore, and basically tries to learn from behavior to say, I revoke the access right, or I grant access rights. So it's more based on learning and experience. So they're very close linked to each other, right? When is it just automation? When is it suddenly AI? So it's not, there's a gray line between. Another area where you see a lot of automation nowadays is, for example, the consumption and cost analysis from IT perspective. So we consume cloud resources in AWS and Azure. We collect the consumption and users data, but now we need to predict and say, do we still need it? Where are cost saving opportunities? Can we do forecasting and optimalization of resources? And again, this requires a lot of data to do cost analysis. And we're not very good in IT for cost management. I'm not sure how you think about it, but not many organizations have good insight of the cost. Of course, we have insight of what we use, but we don't understand who is using it and do we actually need this? Those kind of things. And another example is whole contract management, monitor the contract usage based on the actual usage and do recommendations of where to contracts can be renewed or cancelled. And of course, another area, interesting area, is the whole technology refresh. This is about technology depth. Having an AI bot or technologies identify technology end of life. And relatively, that's not that complicated, of course, but the complexity is that you've got a lot of software components that are end of life, could be databases, servers, vendor software, and you need to combine all the data together and then link them together, because it sounds so simple that you say, this is a software we have, and this is end of life, and who should, what is our technology roadmap looking like? When do we need to upgrade? So it's a kind of technology refresh advisor. And the complexity in this is that if you have deployed versions of even a simple Windows version, if you do scanning, you get many different versions with different labels, and now you need to connect that to a specific end-of-life software product. And that requires data aggregation, mapping between different names to a standard product names as the supplier is looking at it. So again, you need algorithms to combine the data, or you do it manually, right? You map your data and derive it. Now, this gives you, I think, a nice picture of where you see that AI and machine learning is starting to evolve in your digital operating model. Now, I'm close to my ending of my presentation. Risk management was an example. As I just showed you, risk management sits in the space below here. This is where security and risk management plays in. And you see that, for example, vendors that are playing in this market are buying AI technologies to support their processes more and more. So, and that's, I guess, the key trend in the market. Typically, AI is not a standard tool you buy or can buy and apply it to your organization. That's not possible. So what you typically have is AI is part of tooling vendors in this ecosystem, like a ServiceNow or a OneTrust or Atlassian or a Microsoft or a Splunk. And you leverage the AI that will be embedded into these tooling you use for IT management. Now, finalizing this a bit we talked about data, and eventually IT management is the key area for value stream management is data. And as I mentioned, the key area where data is important is what we call the service backbone. Is basically what are the products and services I have, and basically from a business process down to the infrastructure layer. And everything we do, whether it's building, testing, deploying, monitoring, events, incident management, everything is connected to this data backbone. And what this picture basically shows is you need to understand the data in your IT organization, the connectivity between the data and the underlying service topology. And it could be an incident or a security vulnerability or a technology life. Who has changed the source code? Why was the source code changed? Did we test it? What is the change? And basically AI and machine learning will take this data and try to take clever decisions on this. But to do that, you need to have a common information model in your IT organization. If you don't have a common information model in your IT, then there's not much leverage you will get out of all this AI and machine learning investment, because there is no traceability end to end. So if you cannot link an incident to a service, for example, in the right service, and the service linked to source code and build and ownership, that will be very challenging for so you need that context basically. And this is where, this is my last example of AI, is that most organizations start with this example and say, let's put all the data that we have in IT in a data analytics platform, and then starting to apply AI and machine learning patterns on it. So basically what we do is we collect data from Atlassian, Jira, ServiceNow, put it in a data lake and trying to analyze the data. And that's interesting to starting to learn trends, but it's not that actionable. It's more like dashboarding and scorecards and decision making, but it's not as actionable as an AI ops platform. So, but it's a different approach. And as a result of that, you also get different roles in your organization. You probably need have some people that really understand all these machine learning models, even if they're part of just a Splunk application or as part of ServiceNow. You need to have people understanding how do these models work? How do these AI models basically needs to be trained, tested, developed, and deployed into my application landscape. And that's a new area, and that's what they call ML ops. So it's nothing to do with development of your or maintaining your ops model, but this is about how do you develop machine learning capabilities. So you're starting to develop. You basically have a CI/CD pipeline for your machine learning capabilities. So you can have an AI model that you test and deploy into production. So this is a different. This is more about how we develop AI features, AI models, and test and deploy that. So that's a whole kind of new pipeline that's being created to develop machine learning capabilities. Now, finalizing this presentation is you need to work on a more holistic digital capability model. How do I deliver value to my customers from idea to production, let's say? Or if an event occurs, how can we resolve it? So as I mentioned, there's a lot of capabilities involved, and you need to build this bigger picture of how everything is connected. So we need to create a common tooling landscape around this, a common information model. So we need to start with this blueprint. And then you could say, once you have this blueprint defined, where can I leverage AI as provided by typically the vendors like a ServiceNow or a Splunk or Atlassian or Microsoft, and where do I leverage that? And what kind of data issues do I need to fix to get things working? Hopefully, if you've seen this whole picture, it's interesting to see what AI and machine learning is doing. But maybe the more important picture is create a bigger picture yourself for your own IT organization and see how do we build and test and deploy and manage our services and improve and where do we improve these end-to-end flows, and then we can think about, okay, where can we leverage AI and machine learning in this? Now let me pause here, see if there's any questions or other topics, or if people have recommendations or comments, feel free to do so. So I think I hand over then Rajaram, to you to see if there's any question we can discuss.
I
Thanks.
think you brought a panorama of the digital landscape and also the mind-boggling tool set, as Susinder pointed out. Amazing presentation. There are several questions that
Sure.
to our mind. I will start with the initial two, and then we can go on to others and then come back. One of the startling revelations you made was only 5% of available IT data is used in an organization.
Right.
When you say this, are you meaning the structured data or unstructured data?
Both.
And where are people? Where do people stay today in terms of structured data versus unstructured data?
Yeah. So I think it's a good question. It's basically 5% is I guess if you compare it, it's mixed. It's both the structured and unstructured data. The difference is becoming more difficult, right? Structured and unstructured. So let me give you an example. We probably all know Jira, right? We have Jira.
Correct.
And in
widely
that,
used.
Or it could be DevOps, Microsoft DevOps, right? Azure DevOps. But so you have a structured data is the story. The story you could say is structured data. It has a story, it has an issue type and a description, a name and a date time. But what in that same record, there is unstructured data, basically the description of what are we going to deliver, right? That's the blob of data. And so basically what we see is if you take all the stories in Jira as an example, there's not much leverage from the structured data there either, but we do some traceability, like how many stories are fulfilled and who's working what. But there's also unstructured data in that data. Then monitoring data like logs is typically unstructured data. Now, the challenge is that even from our structured data, we don't use that much. Like for incident, for example, take an incident record. We only use for reporting, maybe start time, end date, who's worked on it, but we don't even analyze the content of the data. Did we actually have a good quality incident description? Or what did we actually do to resolve this? Because that was just unstructured data in the resolution field. Now, so the problem is that the unstructured data, we even have more, like test logs, build logs, monitoring data. That's unstructured data. There's a lot of data. We have design documents, right? The requirement specification, Confluence, a lot of the textual description of our, and we have all that data, but we are not able to really combine the data together. And 5% is, and what I did is to analyze it with different customers to see what percentage of the data can we ever use. And to be honest, in some organizations it might be a little bit more, but in general it's pretty low. Yeah, of all the data we collect, and I'm talking about design documentation, my test logs, my monitoring tools, my incident, my changes, my contract data that are stored in PDFs, and all the data together, and link that together is another challenge, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Follow-on question. I'm curious to know if there are any tools which can give me the utilization of this data. For example, for this information which is available with you has not been used for last 2-3 years, right? Is there, is there a tool which is available which can provide me that kind of intelligence?
Yeah, there actually those tools are there. So basically, I didn't really cover that, but we have data management tools for. In most organizations nowadays, data is becoming key element, right? And we talk about data management nowadays to understand the data. And so the business side, is typically what they do is just. And this is coming from the business, like a bank has a lot of data in their management systems. And they have data management tools to actually look at the quality of the data that has not been used for a long time, like not been updated or refreshed. And they try to take decisions there. And this is basically a data management tooling in the market. I'm not really familiar with the whole market in that because I'm not using that a lot, but there's a separate category of data management tools that actually collect the actual data from all the different systems, and then trying to look at the data consistency across the systems, like contract data in different systems. It looks at data quality, data compliance, and so on. Yeah. Then basically it's a data management view across all the repositories you have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's typically a tool. It's typically, yeah. It's typically solutions that are used by the business as well to look at the data, because data management is a key topic. Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Now that a lot of business users have started using reporting tools,
yeah,
making their own ad hoc reports, and
yeah,
so that also gives a kind of capability.
Absolutely.
But the key challenge is the use. For example, how much of this data, where was it used, and what application? So there is no integration of all of these. I think that is where a platform which can integrate all of these use, and then showing, hey, these are pockets of data which have not been utilized anywhere.
Yeah.
So we have to see if AI/ML can bring value adds from that angle.
Yeah. You had two topics, right? One was the like reporting that people have done themselves, right?
Yeah.
But typically many organizations, they create a kind of a data lake, right? So we have a data lake that people have put in place, which is basically my repository where I cannot even write here, but that is what happened. And then there's like a Power BI, all the tools linked to this, right?
Right.
But typically this is limited to a dump of data from your service management system,
Exactly.
from your Jira, and people drag and drop some fields, and of course they can do nice reporting. And of course, they could even do some trend analysis, because most reporting tools have some prediction algorithms in it, like if it's clear. But that's not really the same as actionable data, right? That's not really where immediately, and that's where AI and machine learning is, where you need to have real-time data. Typically in the AI ops space, you need that real-time threat intelligence. But of course, there are still use cases where we collect the data on a, let's say, daily basis, and try to look at where do we need to improve things, like technology advisory, what is end of life. But this is still a challenging area, because the reporting tools, let's say the data lake tools, are becoming a bottleneck. They're not always that mature. There's a lot of effort to collect data and put it in. And there's a lot of data not used in the reports anyway. So we put a lot of data in it and it's not used. And what you miss is the context. So it's not in this picture, but typically the data lake lacks a context from a business process down to the services application, down to the infrastructure. Like, where is this data even linked to? So I can have an incident that's linked to an application, incident to an infrastructure component, but how were they related together? Then I need my context again for my CMDB. Now, data lakes, you could put that in as well if you want, but they are not very good in topology kind of data. That's typically not very well suitable for the traditional data lake systems, but a lot of complexity, like I showed you here, with the dependencies between different application and services, like a fairly complex network system. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there is a question from Parthasarathi Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna, you can unmute and ask the question directly to Rob.
Thanks. So this is about the AI different tools. What are the different prominent vendors, right? And where are people looking in, whether it is on the dev side or the ops side? Right? What kind of use cases people get in when they get into this kind of tool? I know it's a broad question, but yeah, on a high level, it can cover.
Yeah, there were some hiccups in your question, but you say what are people looking into?
Yeah, what are the different vendors in AI tools? Right? What are the different vendors in this AI of tools?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and then on the other side, right? What kind of use cases people are looking at when they are adopting the tool, right? Whether it is on the dev side or the ops side.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I took this picture. Hopefully, I interpret your question correctly. But so, where are people typically looking into? It's in the service monitoring space is typically an area where people are currently looking into for AIOps, and like a Splunk here is an example. Datadog is a good example there. You see AppDynamics in this space using AI and machine learning. Dynatrace the same. ServiceNow the same. Microsoft, these are players where they say we got monitoring tools with AI and machine learning embedded in it. And the same for operational tools, like ServiceNow is investing heavily in AI tools here. In the security space, you see the same with the Splunk and the Logarithm and all the Qualys, they leverage that. I'm not sure if that answers you, but these are typically vendors in this space for the AIOps, where a lot of AI and machine learning is put into these operational tools. And typically you don't use standalone AI tools, right? So for example, if you go to the Google Cloud, you can leverage their machine learning capabilities, or in the Microsoft Azure, but then you need to build the use cases yourself, right? Which is challenging, because then you start with an empty toolbox with algorithms that you can start. So most organizations, they in the IT space, right, they start with leveraging vendors that have built in AI capabilities and starting to leverage that. And in the development space, is less used, but you see it happening in the code quality scanning and the security, that more and more, because of the large volume of data, AI is putting into the space as well. And you see that with AWS, for example, with their code scanning tools, that they scan and code is basically the kind of code advisory tools. And the rest is still pretty new in this area. Like here it's done for security perspective. you see that in this space, value stream management like digital AI and cloud bees are trying to do that, data analytics and trying to do some algorithms there. Does that answer your question? These are the areas where a lot of people are currently looking into. And of course, yeah, risk and compliance area is a big area as well, where we need to understand, and the security, as I mentioned, where large volume of data is processed, typically where AI is emerging in the IT management space. But you're typically dependent on a vendor that embeds this in their solution. That is basically what I'm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you answered. I think traditional vendors have started to embed this capability so that they can
Indeed.
and then possibly they can charge more on enterprises. So for them to adapt.
Exactly. Yeah.
I get where the industry is going at.
Yeah, but the challenge is that typically it's a marketing effort as well, right? They if I go to that picture that I have here, so because in a lot of cases, right, most vendors try to add AI capabilities because it's good for the marketing, right, to tell that we have AI, but often the outcome of AI is still limited, right? For example, we had some ServiceNow is adding capabilities for automated incident routing, right? So they starting here and say, let's automatically, the whole registration is automatically categorized and routed. Yeah, that's a limited use case, right? But it starts there. And in the AIOps space, of course, so it typically starts in areas where there's a lot of data. So quality scanning, testing, identity and access management, security operations. So it typically starts there to leverage AI. And often it's very experimental still, right? And what's also important to mention is that, for example, Splunk has AI capabilities in their logging system and monitoring. But to leverage it, it's not as simple as turning it on, right? You need to have a good structure. You need to experiment a lot because it's also dependent on your service model. Let's say because if you have a lot of data, as I mentioned before, and you cannot link it to something you know of, like a service topology or your services, it's very difficult to get any meaningful decisions out of it. So it requires some maturity as well from your data, unfortunately, which is weird, right? But nothing should stop you starting to experiment it and learn from this, right?
Yeah. I agree, and it also looks like some skill set, right? The traditional guys need to kind of understand some part of machine learning, how things work at least on a high level, even though they may not code models, but they need to understand how things work.
Yeah, that's a good comment you make, because indeed, let's say let's assume you have Splunk or like operational an AIOps tool. You still need to, you don't need to build your models yourself, but typically you need to understand how these work to apply them the right way. So it requires a different type of people than just people that just set up monitoring as they do today. You need to be able to learn how these models work and tune them, and understand how that is actually providing support for decision making.
No, it's interesting times. It's going to be a cycle, long time cycle. I know it's thank you. Connect sometimes.
Thank you, Rob. There are 3 questions in pipeline.
Sorry, Rajaram.
No problem. Susinder, you can unmute and ask your question, please.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
It was a very interesting presentation, and it also raised a question in my mind, which I have drafted there. Tools are ever evolving. The cycle time for tools could be getting shorter and shorter. The DevOps framework or game plan, therefore, needs to be in touch with the changes and create migration paths from time to time. In this spiral, do you foresee one tool replacing 10 others in a short time and get simpler? If predictive modeling is key for success of an algorithm, don't you see a conflict arising from defunct tools vis-a-vis the simpler ones?
Yeah, so let me see if I understand. So what you see, and maybe I'm not sure if you refer to it, but there is a trend indeed that you had a lot of fragmented tools that organizations are moving into consolidating, like as an example would be, for example, here you have your Azure DevOps, let's say, platform. And Azure DevOps, you can do your backlog management, your development and testing, your CI/CD pipeline. It becomes a platform. And the same with ServiceNow. You have a platform here to support you there. So these are becoming platforms. And as part of these platforms, there's different capabilities, but they're connected to each other. And we're starting to use AI here in these platforms. And I'm not sure if you alluded to that, so that you see that instead of having all those fragmented tools, we're starting to use platforms where we have a set of capabilities running, and the data is shared and integrated. And there we can leverage AI better than if we had 10 different tools in the tool chain. Because it is, if you have like a separate Jenkins pipeline, a separate testing tool, separate course code, Jira, and you need to get sense out of that. You typically need to across all these tools. Yeah.
Yeah, and follow-on question is there an open source tool?
Yeah, right. That's what, yeah.
For a limited budget, for those with limited budget.
Yeah, well, that is a challenge nowadays, because if you think about there are open source tools in different sub places, like this pipeline and the Jenkins, your Git repositories here. You got a lot of open source testing tools. You got your open source deployment tools, right? Like a Terraform or semi-open tools today, because a lot of them you still like Ansible in the past, but now if you want to have a managed version, is you pay for it. The same for container orchestration. There's an open, but there are still fragmented open source components. But an open source component that really links everything together, it's still not really there, right? So that's why a lot of people still use the Jiras, the Azure DevOps, the ServiceNow as platforms, the Splunk here. But in theory, you should be able to put all the components in a kind of open source, although for the service management space, there are not many good open source products, right? But on the monitoring space, there are, on the deployment space, there are, on the test management space, there are, but then you have to integrate a lot of them yourself often. And they have different, yeah. So what I see typically happening is that people starting to say, we have our core tools that I need to run digital, let's say, not Splunk here, ServiceNow and Jira there, or Azure DevOps there, and then you fill it with additional open source component like deployment, monitoring, testing, because there you can leverage the open source, but you still integrate them with the overall, let's say, platform like Azure DevOps, for example. But maybe the market will go more to open source, but yeah, on the component level, yes, but on that integration level. And for example, what you see, there's a separate tooling space now emerging. That's in the picture I just showed here was this picture, is that value stream management products. These are what they try to do is say, I integrate with all those components like a test tool, deployment tool, and I try to integrate that data to get meaningful traceability end to end. These are value stream management tools nowadays, like TaskTop is doing, ServiceNow is starting doing, GitLab is doing that, Plutora, Digital AI, CloudBees. They're trying to integrate solutions from different vendors together to get this integrated platform across multiple tools. Yeah.
Dr. Rajaram, one extended question, if you don't mind. Rob, I am just giving you one, development in the sense like your credit cards were offering you a credit period, and then customers had to pay at a particular point in time, and that was how the entire system was working. Now it says buy now and pay later.
Yeah,
there is no credit card in between, but there are all these payment banks or payment companies who are offering buy now and pay later.
Yes,
now,
indeed.
This has to kind of, definitely set fire for the credit card companies, and they need to change their, entire logarithm completely, to make the customer stay with them. So in this kind of a situation, there's going to be a whole lot of changes that will happen in the DevOps framework. So I just wanted to know, in the sense like, how soon can this change be managed?
Yeah, in this case, you mean there is a business change that we demand, right?
Yeah.
And how soon can yeah, teams deliver that? Is that what you are like in a DevOps mode?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I think the key challenge always is that for this example, I'm not sure. I don't know the example exactly, but typically the many teams need to work together. So in a DevOps mode, and that's maybe I should if I draw it like here, we typically have, and that's I guess if I let me quickly draw that. Like typically, what the problem is that we have a new business service that we want to or sometimes called an end-to-end business process. We need to change that, but of course we have different applications that support that, and each app, and so typically we need to modify multiple applications at the same time. Not sure if that was you're alluding to. So we have different apps, and this we, I guess has different DevOps teams working on it. So DevOps team 1, and the challenge typically is the speed of one team is typically high, right? But getting something into the market is often slower because you have to work with all these, yeah, all the collaboration between all these teams is the challenge. So it's typically not a challenge of the individual DevOps team, but the challenge is really collaborate across these teams to make sure the end-to-end business process works. And in your example, I assume if you want to change that, you probably need to modify multiple applications by multiple teams. And then suddenly there is alignment needed between all these teams. So the speed of delivering something, a change in production, is often not only determined by the individual speed of the teams or DevOps teams, but more about how am I capable or introducing a new epic that is supported by multiple features by multiple teams. And that is, I think, the biggest challenge. And there's no automation to do that, right? Because
Yeah, right.
like this is your business change.
Yeah, yes.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, because maybe I misunderstood the question. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's a change that is happening within a business, and therefore, how do the organizations kind of equip themselves to meet this change?
Yeah,
Therefore,
and that's no, indeed, and that basically what you see is that scaling your, because that's what's changing in agile organizations nowadays, that they create there is a value stream. This is typically a value stream, like let's say this is my business value stream, order to cash, let's say, and here we have a value stream owner, and we have different product teams below that, and so they started to organize themselves around those business processes, business value streams, so that they can faster act upon business change. So basically pull all these 3 teams together in one. Yeah, and in skilled agile, they might call this an art. We could maybe call the tribe, a team of teams model, right? And this is business aligned, business aligned teams, and then you'll be able to faster respond to business change.
Yeah.
But then you need to be, but then you already need to set that model up before business change. It's not because so basically you already need to set up your organization now to organize yourself around these business processes, business value streams, customer journeys, down to the and there you can be able to create faster speed to respond to business change or the market changes. Yeah.
Thanks.
Nice question indeed.
Yeah. Rob, do we have another 10 minutes of your time?
Yeah, if it's okay with you, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, there are 2-3 more questions which have come. Sujat, at this point, you can unmute and ask your questions.
Yeah, typically in a service organization, Rob, we are dependent on customers' data, right? So the data is residing in the customer's environment, and it's all disparate and it's all scattered, and then we really don't get to we can't pull this data to train the model. So how do we circumvent those challenges in training a model?
Yeah.
In this scenario.
Yeah, and in this case, you mean like in an outsourcing model, for example, you provide services to multiple customers, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is challenging. So one area you see that's where if you don't have the data in production, then you're also difficult to train the data, of course. But what happens is in what nowadays you see that in the outsourcing models where we say, can we allow to exchange data? Like maybe it's data related to the user experience on the workplace. So it needs to be contractually arranged that we are allowed to have access to the data and process that. And nowadays they call that data usage contracts, like a kind of data usage policies. They say I'm allowed to use the data to train my models, and it needs to be formally agreed. So in risk management, they have a separate workflows for these kind of data usage contracts. But then you also might need to anonymize the data for testing. So typically you don't want to use real data for testing the model. So you need to be able to anonymize the data. There's a lot of compliance issues with that if it's real customer data. So there's still a lot of challenges. Yeah, I think we've not solved it, but in many organizations where the data is fragmented at the customer side already, yeah, it would be nice if we can work with the customer to build a kind of data exchange method where we can at least have access to data to improve our support. But that's challenging. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when the other thing is where you were saying, no, the data is pooled into data lake, that's only serves as a dashboard, right? So what further has to be done? Like, are you saying that the data, it's just not enough if we pull the data from the different sources into data lake?
Yeah, that's not enough.
Mm,
Now, yeah,
mm, mm,
basically there are different use cases, right? So one use case, imagine the use case that we just talked about. So one is that, let's say we want to proactively detect or act on events, right? So we talk about, that's the use case here. So maybe that's the difference. We have a system that monitors our environment and we need to immediately act upon. So this is the AIOps platform, right? That is a real-time system. So it's not a data lake that is a little bit delayed. So it's a real-time system. So in that sense, the first use case is where we have the event management, there should be AI embedded and your data. So basically in all these areas, you have the decision making. And so it's close to where the work is done. You have the AI because you want to use it at the time where the data is generated. So basically where the data is created, there you put the logic. Now, you still have your data lake. Is basically a different use case is you say, I have a data lake here and I collect data across multiple systems. So which is a different use case because you're out of the work session, so you cannot take an action. So because then it's done in a data lake. So, but in a data lake, you could also have learning mechanisms, and then you're starting to action here, and then, but it's not real time. It's more like decision making. Like, for example, if we learn that some changes have not been successful over time because of reasons, I can put that logic I can put in a data lake or a data science platform, learn from that, and then modify my procedure. So that's still a valuable use case, but it's more like less the time. Yeah, it's more like more learning and act later than the real life actionable insights that you need in an event management or security ops. But they're both used together, but they're different use cases, right? Now, but you also get new trends like, you know, probably like the ODS, a kind of operational data store, where they say we almost have near real-time data consolidated in a Google Cloud platform or Azure. And then you could argue, yeah, I could do near real-time data analytics and actions. The challenge still is that if you want to automate an action from here, how do I do that? So typically you want to be part of that automation system already to do the action, right? Not in a reporting solution. There's not much action. Yeah, you could build it upon that, right? But so there are different use cases. So I think most of the time you want to embed your AI into the systems, like in your service management system, in your Jira system, in your testing tools, in your code quality scanning tools. Yeah. And this
got
one
it.
you have as well. Yeah.
Got it. That's really useful. A wonderful session, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rob, the next question comes from Professor TV Gopal. Professor, you can unmute and ask your question, please.
Yes. Good evening. Thank
Good
you
day.
for a wonderful exposure of the tools, amazing set of tools. Now, one quick question. Earlier on, all these systems which are operationally critical had a feature that the end user gradually learns the system. The emphasis on the tools is putting the end user away. That fellow will be totally dumb as things progress. How do we bring that end user back in the game to learn better? Say, for example, at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning in India, where the entire country is sleeping, the server appears very busy.
Yeah. And then, but yeah, and that. Oh, you were still asking a question, or that was you finished?
Done. I'm done. Thank you.
No, but I think it's a nice comment. But indeed, because a lot of AI and automation is used to replace a person, but you also have AI assisted work indeed. So I think it's a nice way of thinking. How can we put the person back into the picture? So for example, if there's a new system introduced or new feature, you could say the AI will just train the end user how to better use the system, right? Those kind of capabilities are there. And similar, we use that as well today with the chatbot. If you want to register a new request, you are in the request form, and then suddenly a bot comes up when he notices and say, "Can I help you with?" and doing some assistance, right? So you get AI assisted workflows. That is happening a lot, typically in your raising and a request, right? It can or a work order, and then it's fully assisted. Another use is like the example you gave. In the middle of the night, there is a server, a high performance, or something is happening, and it's of course an anomaly with what you expect. So there's an event raised, but maybe we cannot automatically resolve that. So we need the end user or the operator needs to be notified. We know his schedule and so on, and then we assist the operator to find, okay, this is what happened in the like a time traveling. This is when the first thing happened, and we take the user or the operator in this case hand by hand what happened and tell and get assistance. So there are different ways, but I like the idea of having more like person. How can we can AI leverage the user? Now in the development space, you see that more and more because the developer, so in this case in the DevOps world, the developer is interesting because it's really about that individual, or not, it's about the developer that develops new code, let's say. That is typically still a human work, right? But we can assist the developer by advising how to code better. How can we automatically generate test cases based on the code changes? How can we better analyze the designs or automatically update designs based on some of the coding? And so here you see more that the developer is assisted by AI, by looking at kind of a peer reviews, code quality scans, automated testing, by advising improvements in code or changes there. So yeah, but that should be much more focused. That's a little bit lacking today indeed.
Thank you.
Dr. Gopal, can we call it human factors in industrial engineering systems?
No, the human factors are already in. We do understand, but they're all internal to the tool. And we think the rest of the story is all taken care.
Okay.
But the point is, there should be a way in which the end user should learn more and more about how the human factor is also happening. That is the missing link, which is
Yes.
Yeah, Rob, before we go to the vote of thanks by Raghav, I just have one final question. What could be a disruptive technology or process or tool in the next 2 to 3 years? I know AML is definitely going to be disruptive. That is a accepted technology. But are you seeing anything else in the horizon, which is very early, but can be potentially disruptive?
Yeah, in this space, let's say, what is disruptive? To be honest, AI and machine learning has not been disruptive yet, right, in this market, because what's happening, the players, and what I mean by disruptive mean a new player comes in and changes the play. For example, the existing players like a ServiceNow and a Splunk and Atlassian, they just adopt AI and they're using it. So it's not really a game changer in this space, but
No,
it is.
when I say disruption, it is not only from the point of tools and other things.
Yeah.
The way humans, for example, now today AI ML is doing what many of the humans cannot comprehend. They are disrupting the humans, right? Same way, any powerful technology or process or technique, whether in the enterprise landscape, do you see emerging?
Yeah, now at this moment there were a few options for this, right? Like in the past they thought blockchain could maybe do this, right? Kind of a connectivity and traceability, because traceability is typically a challenge. Augmented reality, but at this moment, if you think about the data space, that I don't see directly a new, unless it's more like a changing of something, we call it differently, because AI is very broad concept, right?
Right.
But what I could see as a game changer is more about how we manage work today. So today, and that could be a disruptive. For example, in this space, we have separate for request management, problem management, team backlog, demand, and it's the same at the business. We got demands, we got requests, but there is not a single place to manage work in IT. So we have a backlog for incidents, for Jira there, and we have, but it's all about work, and work is about collaborating with stakeholders, doing the actual. So the way, and you see some vendors in the market like generic methods to manage work, like I forgot the name, Monday. There are a few of those vendors. Suddenly they say, yeah, here we can manage. And it's weird, right? That we're still struggling to manage all the work. And it's sometimes in Slack, you got some notifications. So what I see is disruptive potentially. There are so many places where you got your mobile phone, where you have, let's say, your WhatsApp, you got your Slack, you got your incidents in ServiceNow, you got so many channels of information, MS Teams, but they don't come together at all. So I'm more looking into, can we have new technologies that can help us bring it more together, and not just from individual tasks, but from end-to-end value streams, and focus on what do we need to do now, advise what to do. Like today, I have to, for my time, it's 1:30. My Google says, yeah, you have a meeting, but it's all separate, siloed decisions. It's not really that I'm taking to a journey here and help assisted by tools, right? So, but I don't see at this moment a real new technology. What you see in the business is a digital twin concept, right? That could help us, that you create a kind of digital copy of your business and try to experiment and change things and see what's happening. So digital twins could be an interesting concept, where as a disruptor, because digital twin is typically used in manufacturing to have more complex machines. They model that and then simulate things. Imagine you could digital twin of your business, try to remodel your business and change and see what's happening with the outcome. That would be really nice, because then you can experiment and learn much faster than you do today. Because if you want to learn today, you have to change your organization and start working, but you cannot simulate new ways of working. You cannot do and that would be interesting. You build a sort of digital twin of your organization, you modify some parameters, you run it in an accelerated state and see over what's happening to my business.
Simulation,
but simulation at a different scale, I guess. Simulation is done today very limited on a process level, but the real process in business is much more complex. So what you need to do is automatically understand your business flows, and that's very complex. In IT, it's already complex, and then put it in a sort of digital twin, and then try to analyze if you change. Because today, business process analysis is done really on individual processes often, right? But not of the real work that's happening in a business. It's very fragmented.
That is the highest maturity in a digital transformation world.
Yeah.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Rob. At this time, I would like to invite Raghav, steering committee member at the Spin Chennai, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thanks, Rajaram sir. Thanks, Rob, for taking the time on a Saturday and agreeing to speak at Spin Chennai. This topic, to be very honest, we wanted to have the session at least 6 months ago, and we have been finding speakers. We were in search of speakers, and then we found that you would be the right person. And thanks for giving the this topic. Somebody did not agree. In fact, we spoke with somebody at one of the large companies who's a very popular person. We tried reaching out to him. He said that no, this topic is still vague. Leveraging AML, I cannot speak, he said. So no, thanks for taking such a tough topic. Of course, it is an emerging area. And,
Yes.
And people on call, you can Google Rob's name, especially on YouTube. He has so much of followers, and you can see, take a look at his YouTube videos. It is most of the videos are revelatory, and it makes you think in a different angle. And even in today's talk, he has set the stage from the beginning and to the highest level of maturity. And he started with the digital operating model and the evolving digital operating model, and then starting with the digital value chain, and he moved on to the AML part. It is fantastic. And he's a co-chair of IT4IT also. So he's the person that whom we always wanted to listen to him. He's one of kind of the person we always wanted to listen. Thanks, Rob, for once again for being here with us from Netherlands. Thank you so much once again. And one more before I forget.
Thank you as well for being here. Really.
So we asked him two topics. Which one was the choice, whether digital operating model or AML? He actually combined both in the same topic. We gave him which topic you wanted to speak. The choice is yours. He said, no, I'll speak on both the topics. So that's why we mentioned that leveraging AML and DevSecOps Tool Chain, fueling a digital operating model. In today's session, you had two topics covered in one theme. Hey, thank you, Rob, once again.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the session. I enjoyed the questions, and appreciate being in your community. It's really nice. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too.